Alright, let's go. Number 10. The sleep function problem. In the early 1980s, Alan Reshoffin at the University of Chicago was not searching for anything strange. He wanted a simple answer to a simple question. What breaks first when an animal cannot sleep? He built a rotating disc apparatus that gently forced rats awake whenever their EEG signatures crossed into sleep. The setup was clean. The controls were rigorous. He expected to identify the specific organ or system that failed first. The prevailing assumption at the time was that sleep exists for restoration. Some tissue repairs. Some energy conservation. Some housekeeping the body cannot perform while active. If that were true, a single system should fail. A biochemical marker should spike. A recognizable pathology should emerge. The rats died. All of them. Within 2 to 3 weeks. And no single organ was the cause. Reshoffin and his colleagues published the results in a series of papers in the journal Sleep beginning in 1983 and extending through 1989. The animals lost weight while eating more, their body temperature dysregulated, their skin ulcerated. Their immune systems collapsed in patterns nobody predicted. Everything failed at once, and nothing failed first. Since then, every proposed explanation has failed to close. Energy conservation cannot explain it, the metabolic savings of a night of sleep amount to roughly the calories in a slice of bread. Memory consolidation covers only a fraction of sleep's duration, and does not explain non-dreaming animals that still sleep. Mike and Niedergaard's 2013 paper in Science on Glymphatic Clearance offered one compelling piece, the brain flushing metabolic waste during sleep, but did not answer why the price is total unconsciousness. Giulio Tononi's synaptic homeostasis model at the University of Wisconsin remains partial. You will spend roughly 25 years of your life in a state that renders you deaf, blind, and defenseless. No theory yet explains why evolution accepted that cost. What was worth 25 years? That is a system running your body. The next is a system running your body against you. Number 9. The deliberate paralysis. In the late 1950s, Michel Jouvet at the University of Lyon was mapping the brainstem in cats. He was not looking for anything disturbing. He wanted to identify which structures generated the fast electrical rhythms he had recorded during what he would later name paradoxical sleep. He placed careful lesions in the pontine tegmentum and expected the recordings to change. The standard picture then held that sleep was passive. Muscle tone dropped because activity dropped. The brain quieted and the body followed. There was no reason to expect a dedicated system whose only job was to hold the body still. The lesion cats stood up. Fully asleep, in confirmed REM, they walked, stalked, hissed, and attacked invisible prey. The paralysis was not passive. It was a switch, and the switch had a location. Jouvet published the findings in Archives Italiennes de Biologie in 1962. The pathway was refined over the following 4 decades. Michael Chase and Francisco Morales at UCLA identified the glycinergic inhibition of spinal motor neurons in a 1990 paper in Neuroscience. Patrick Fuller and Clifford Saper at Harvard traced the descending signal from the sublaterodorsal nucleus down to the ventromedial medulla in a 2007 Journal of Comparative Neurology paper. Every proposed explanation has narrowed the mechanism without answering the question. The protective hypothesis that paralysis stops you acting out dreams is undermined by the fact that the inhibition is far more complete than protection requires. The energy account fails because sustaining active inhibition is metabolically expensive. The evolutionary story cannot say why the system exists in creatures that do not appear to dream in any recognizable sense. Several times a night, a specific circuit in your brainstem sends a signal down your spinal cord that disconnects your body from your will. It is deliberate, it is precise, it is required. Why does the brain need to hold you down? That happens after you are asleep. The next happens on the way in. Number 8. The threshold hallucinations. Herbert Silberer, a Viennese psychoanalyst in Freud's early circle, was trying to describe his own falling asleep. He kept notes at the edge of consciousness in 1909 and noticed something that did not fit the categories he had been trained to use. He was not asleep. He was not awake. And he was seeing things that were not there. Consciousness, in most models, is treated as effectively binary. Awake states involve external sensory processing. Sleep states involve internal simulation, dreaming, or nothing recallable at all. The transition should be a brief switch, a threshold crossed quickly, without content of its own. Instead, the threshold has content. Structured content. And it is common. David Fulkus and Gerald Vogel at the University of Chicago documented the phenomenon systematically in a 1965 paper in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, waking subjects at successive stages of sleep onset and cataloging their reports. Andreas Mavromatis compiled the wider literature in his 1983 Brunel University dissertation, later published as Hypnagogia in 1987. Roughly 37% of the general population report recurrent hypnagogic experiences in surveys collated by Maurice Ohayon in a 1996 Journal of Clinical Psychiatry review. Every explanation has fallen short. Dream fragment leakage cannot account for the phenomenology. Hypnagogic imagery has different neural signatures from REM dreams, more sensory, less narrative. Microsleep intrusions fail because subjects remain in verified stage 1 sleep or in wakefulness with clear EEG signatures. Random cortical noise fails because the content is often structured. Voices calling your name, falling sensations, geometric patterns that repeat across unrelated individuals. You have already experienced this, the jolt of falling as you begin to sleep. The voice you almost heard, the face that formed in the dark. It has no accepted mechanism. There is a room between waking and sleeping, and something is in it. That is what you notice on the way into sleep. This is what you lose on the way out. Number 7. The nightly deletion. Robert Stickgold at Harvard Medical School was not interested in why we forget dreams. He was interested in how sleep helps us remember other things, how a night of sleep improves performance on visual and motor learning tasks. His work through the 1990s and 2000s pointed to sleep as an active memory consolidation process. If sleep exists in part to preserve memory, then dreams, which are experiences by any reasonable definition, should be preserved along with the rest. Or, if dreams are noise to be discarded, the discarding should be gradual, tracking normal forgetting curves. Neither is what happens. Dream recall collapses within roughly 90 seconds of waking. Stickgold summarized the state of the field in a 2005 Nature review titled Sleep-Dependent Memory Consolidation. The wipe is not gradual, it is not random, it is fast, and it is targeted. In 2019, Shuntaro Izawa and colleagues at Nagoya University published a paper in Science identifying a specific population of hypothalamic neurons expressing melanin-concentrating hormone whose firing during REM sleep actively suppresses memory formation for dream content. Every alternative account has been challenged. State-dependent memory. The idea that dream memories require the dream state to be retrieved cannot explain why waking cues fail to recover them. Low noradrenaline during REM was Alan Hobson's proposal, and it accounts for some of the encoding failure, but not the specificity of the deletion. The passive decay model cannot survive the Izawa finding, because deletion turns out to be an active process with dedicated cells. Every night for hours you live an experience. Every morning, a specific circuit in your hypothalamus erases it before you can carry it forward. Whose interest does that serve? You lose the dreams. But sleep does more than delete. Number 6. The unknown editor. Jan Born at the University of Tübingen has spent 3 decades trying to understand what the sleeping brain does with the day just ended. He was not searching for a mystery. He was trying to close one, to identify the mechanism that turns unstable short-term memories into stable long-term ones. The picture that emerged, mostly through work with slow-wave sleep, is that consolidation is real. Active and selective. Some experiences are strengthened, others fade. This should not be strange. Some memories obviously matter more than others. The strangeness is in how the brain chooses. Suzanne Diekelman and Jan Born reviewed the mechanism in their 2010 paper in Nature Review's Neuroscience titled The Memory Function of Sleep. Sharp wave ripples in the hippocampus, first mapped in detail by Georgi Busky at Rutgers and later at NU, replay the day's events at compressed speed during slow-wave sleep. The replayed sequences are then transferred to the neocortex for long-term storage, but not all of them, and the selection criteria are not known. The emotional tagging hypothesis captures part of it. Amygdala-linked memories are prioritist, as shown by Jessica Payne and Elizabeth Kensinger at Boston College. Prior salience captures another part. Memories that mattered during encoding tend to be replayed. Neither explains cases where trivial-seeming experiences are consolidated and important ones vanish. Neither explains the finding by Bernard Rasch and Jan Born in a 2007 Science paper that specific odors reintroduced during slow-wave sleep can bias which memories are strengthened. Every night, a system inside your skull decides which of your experiences will become part of the person you are tomorrow, and which will not. The system has rules. Nobody has read them. You are being edited. You do not have the editorial notes. You are edited without knowing. The next entry is knowing while it happens. Number 5. The state that should not exist. Keith Hearn, a doctoral student at the University of Hull in the late 1970s, was trying to solve a smaller problem. He wanted to know whether communication with a person in the middle of a dream was possible in principle. His subject, Alan Worsley, had claimed for years that he became aware inside his own dreams. Hearn asked him to signal his awareness using prearranged left-right eye movements, the one muscle group that remains active during REM sleep. The received view at the time was that consciousness and dreaming were mutually exclusive. You were either the awake self observing reality or the dreaming self absorbed in simulation. There was no ledge between them. On the morning of April 12, 1975, the polysomnograph in Hearn's lab recorded a series of deliberate, patterned eye movements in the middle of confirmed REM sleep. Worsley had signaled from inside a dream. Hearn wrote up the finding in his 1978 University of Hull dissertation. Stephen LeBerg at Stanford independently replicated it and published in Perceptual and Motor Skills in 1980. Ursula Voss and colleagues at the J.W. Goethe University in Frankfurt later characterized the neural signature in a 2009 paper in Sleep, identifying elevated 40 Hz gamma activity in frontal regions during lucid REM, the same frequency band linked to waking self-reflective consciousness. Every attempt to deflate it has failed. Micro-awakening was ruled out by continuous REM signatures on the EEG. Confabulation was ruled out by the prearrangement of the signal. Brief arousal was ruled out by sleep stage continuity across the signaling window. There is a state in which you are simultaneously asleep, hallucinating, and self-aware. You can, with training, enter it. It has been measured in a laboratory. Consciousness knows it is inside a lie and continues watching. What else is it doing that we have not measured? That awareness comes from a functioning brain. The next comes from one that is not. Number 4. The flatline recall. Sam Parnia, a critical care physician trained at Southampton and now leading resuscitation research at New Langone, was not investigating consciousness. He was investigating survival. His clinical question was whether cardiac arrest patients could recover verifiable information about their resuscitations, information whose accuracy could be checked against the medical record. The neurological framework he was working within is well established. Consciousness requires cortical activity. Within roughly 10 to 20 seconds of cardiac arrest, cerebral blood flow drops below the threshold required to sustain cortical function, and EEG activity flattens. From that point until circulation is restored, there should be no experience because there is no measurable substrate for experience. Parnia's AWARE study, published in Resuscitation in 2014 and extended as AWARE 2 in 2023, followed 2,060 cardiac arrests across multiple hospitals. Roughly 9% of survivors reported experiences consistent with the standard near-death typology. Around 2% had explicit recall of specific events during cardiac arrest, including one case in which a patient accurately described 3-minute intervals marked by an automated defibrillator's audio cue during a period of confirmed asystole. Every explanation attempted has struggled. The hypoxic hallucination model cannot account for the structured, coherent narrative content. Hypoxic experience is fragmentary and confused. The residual activity hypothesis received support from Jimo Borjgin's 2013 PNAS paper, showing a surge of high-frequency EEG in dying rats. But that surge lasts under 30 seconds and cannot cover cardiac arrests measured in minutes. The endogenous DMT release hypothesis, popularized by Rick Strassman, has been challenged by David Nichols at Purdue on the grounds that endogenous DMT levels are too low to produce the effects claimed. Something is being remembered from an interval in which nothing should be remembering. The relationship between your brain and your continued awareness is not settled. That is consciousness where none should be. The next is behavior where consciousness is not. Number 3. The acts without an actor. Roger Broughton at the University of Ottawa in the 1960s was cataloging the parasomnias, the behaviors that erupt out of sleep without waking the sleeper. He was not searching for a legal problem. He was trying to classify a set of clinical presentations that had until then been treated as psychiatric curiosities. The framework he inherited held that complex, goal-directed behavior required consciousness. Walking, driving, opening locks, using tools, these were wake behaviors. Sleep might allow simple motor patterns. It should not allow the full apparatus of intention. Broughton published Sleep Disorders, Disorders of Arousal, in Science in 1968, arguing that sleepwalking is a partial arousal from slow-wave sleep in which motor systems come online while awareness does not. In the decades since, the phenomenology has widened. Claudio Bassetti and colleagues published a 2000 paper in The Lancet documenting somnambulism with SPECT imaging that showed simultaneous activation of motor and limbic regions alongside deactivation of the frontoparietal association cortex, awake muscles, asleep judgment. Then the courts became involved. Kenneth Parks, in May 1987, drove 23 kilometers from his home in Toronto to his in-law's house, killed his mother-in-law, seriously injured his father-in-law, and turned himself in to police with no coherent memory of the events. Sleep laboratory studies at Toronto Western Hospital confirmed his non-REM parasomnia. He was acquitted at trial, and the acquittal was upheld by the Supreme Court of Canada in 1992. Every attempt to reduce the phenomenon has failed. Malingering is ruled out by the polysomnographic signature. Simple dissociation cannot explain the sustained navigational and motor coordination. Frontal lobe suppression during arousal, the current best account, describes the neural state but does not explain how planning-like behavior proceeds without planning. Something in your skull can drive a car, prepare a meal, and end a life, and the part of you that remembers, decides, and answers to a name may not be present while it happens. Are you always the one acting? That is sleep acting like waking life. The next is the opposite. Number 2, the state that looks like sleep and is not. Emory Brown, an anesthesiologist and statistician at Massachusetts General Hospital in MIT, was not trying to unsettle his own field. He was trying to make anesthesia safer. Specifically, he wanted to understand what the EEG of a patient under general anesthesia was actually telling him, because for most of the 20th century, clinicians had treated the induced state as functionally equivalent to deep sleep. The clinical assumption was practical. From the outside, an anesthetized patient and a sleeping patient look similar. Eyes closed, breathing steady, unresponsive to speech. Rousable in the case of sleep by strong stimulation, not rousable in the case of anesthesia until the drug is cleared. The EEG says the two states are not the same. Brown, together with Ralph Leidick and Nicholas Schiff, published a review in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2010 titled General Anesthesia, Sleep, and Coma. Natural sleep cycles through characteristic stages with distinct oscillatory signatures, spindles, slow waves, REM. General anesthesia produces different patterns entirely. burst suppression under propofol at higher doses, coherent alpha oscillations across frontal cortex, and thalamocortical disconnection that has no natural sleep equivalent. The alternative explanations have collapsed. The deep sleep hypothesis fails at the Ig level, since the signatures are not those of any natural sleep stage. The general neural inhibition model fails, because anesthetics act on specific receptor systems, GABA-A, NMDA, alpha-2 adrenergic, with distinct network effects mapped by Michael Alkire and colleagues at Irvine in a 2008 science paper titled Consciousness and Anesthesia. When you are put under, you are not sleeping. You are held in a reversible state closer to coma than to any sleep your ancestors knew. Modern medicine performs this on millions of people every year without a complete theory of what the state is. You have been there. You will likely be there again. The line between conscious states is not what we thought. The line at the end is worse. Number 1. The lucidity before the end. Michael Naum, a German biologist, was not looking for controversy. He was reviewing old medical and nursing case reports for a historical paper on end-of-life experiences. He kept finding the same pattern described by different observers across 2 centuries. Patients with severe dementia or long-standing psychiatric illness, becoming, in the hours before death, clear, coherent, and recognizably themselves. The received view in modern neurology treats late-stage Alzheimer's disease and advanced dementia as irreversible. Neurons are lost. Networks are dismantled. The functional substrate that supported the person's personality, memory, and speech no longer exists in the tissue. Recovery of that person, however briefly, should not be possible. Naum and Bruce Grayson published a review of the phenomenon in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease in 2009. A larger case series, co-authored with Erlander Haraldsson, followed in the Archives of Gerontology and Geriatrics in 2012. The reports are clinical, drawn from physicians and nurses, and they describe patients mute for months, speaking in full sentences, recognizing family members whose names had been lost for years, and asking questions appropriate to their situation, sometimes hours, sometimes minutes before death. Every explanation has failed to close. Coincidence fails because the temporal clustering is too tight. Undiagnosed reversible causes fail because subsequent autopsies confirm the underlying damage. Family misinterpretation fails because trained clinicians are the observers in the strongest cases. The terminal surge hypothesis, based on Lakhmir Chawla's 2009 Journal of Palliative Medicine paper documenting brief spikes of Ig activity near death, cannot account for events lasting hours in patients who then die conscious. Something is speaking through a brain that, on any current model, should no longer contain the speaker. It happens rarely. It happens. It has been documented for centuries. What we call the person and what we can measure of the person may not be the same thing. Every item on this list sits at a place already measured. Sleep is universal. Dreams are nightly. Anesthesia is routine. Death is certain. These are not the frontier, they are the center of the theories we most trust, and at that center the accounts break. The universe is not confused about what consciousness is, or what happens when the brain quiets. We are. Tonight, you will enter, willingly, a series of states no complete theory yet describes. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now.